The room went completely dark. Not the normal darkness of a room with the lights off, but a deeper darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. Jake felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. It was the kind of cold that came from being truly alone. The final trial begins now. Veltara's voice came from somewhere in the darkness. This is the test of hope. Jake tried to move, but his feet felt heavy, like they were stuck in thick mud. Around him, he could hear sounds that made his skin crawl. Whispers in languages he didn't recognize, mixed with something that sounded like crying. Slowly, images began to appear in the darkness. But these weren't the clean, bright holograms from the previous trials. These were twisted, broken things that hurt to look at. Jake saw cities burning, ships exploding in space, and people running in terror from something he couldn't see clearly. What is this? Jake asked, his voice sounding small in the vast darkness. This is what we face, Kethran's voice replied. This is why we came to your people. The images became clearer and more terrible. Jake saw entire planets being consumed by a darkness that moved like a living thing. He watched as whole civilizations simply gave up fighting and let themselves be destroyed. Most horrifying of all, he saw that the people didn't look afraid as they died. They looked relieved, like they were finally free from some terrible burden. The Devourers, Veltara said. They are not like other enemies. They do not conquer through force or destroy through violence. They consume hope itself. Jake watched in horror as the darkness spread across star systems like a plague. Everywhere it touched, people simply stopped trying to live. They didn't run or fight or even scream. They just laid down and waited to die. How is that possible? Jake asked. They have weapons that attack the mind, the golden-marked female explained. They broadcast despair directly into your thoughts. They make you believe that fighting is pointless, that there is no hope for victory, that death is better than struggle. And it works? Jake asked. It works on every species we have encountered, Kethran said sadly. Even the strongest warriors eventually give up. Even the wisest leaders lose the will to continue. The Devourers have consumed 17 civilizations in the past century alone. The images around Jake showed the pattern repeating over and over. Different worlds, different species, but always the same result. The darkness would arrive. The people would resist for a while, and then they would simply stop fighting and let themselves be consumed. So, what makes you think humans would be different? Jake asked. Because, Veltara said, in all our studies of your species, we have found something that no other race possesses. You are the only people who become more stubborn when told that something is impossible. Jake felt the darkness pressing in around him, trying to make him feel hopeless. He could feel it working on his mind, whispering that he was too small, too weak, too young to make a difference. The whispers told him that humanity was doomed, that the Devourers would eventually find Earth and destroy it, just like they had destroyed so many other worlds. I can feel it, Jake said, his voice shaking. It's trying to make me give up. That is the test, Veltara said. You must face the full power of their despair weapon and find a way to keep fighting anyway. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They told Jake that everyone he cared about would die, that his friends and family would suffer, that nothing he did would matter in the end. The darkness showed him images of Earth being consumed, of Captain Rodriguez and his crewmates giving up hope and laying down to die. Jake felt his knees buckle. The weight of despair was incredible, like trying to carry a mountain on his shoulders. He could understand why other species gave up. It would be so easy to just lie down and let the darkness take him. But then something strange happened. Instead of giving up, Jake got angry. No, he said, his voice getting stronger. I don't believe. You. The darkness pressed harder, showing him more terrible images. But Jake pushed back, not with weapons or technology, but with pure human stubbornness. I don't care how hopeless it looks, Jake said, getting to his feet. I don't care how many. Other people have given up. I'm not going to quit. Outside the simulation, Captain Rodriguez was watching with amazement. He's actually fighting it off. How? Dr. Brooks asked. The psychological pressure should be overwhelming. He's not using logic, Danny Kim observed. He's using emotion. He's getting mad instead of getting depressed. Back in the simulation, Jake was standing up straighter, his voice getting louder with each word. You want to know what makes humans different? We're too stupid to know when we're beaten. We're too stubborn to accept that something is impossible. And we're too angry to just lie down and die. The darkness recoiled slightly, as if surprised by his response. Jake pressed his advantage. You've been picking on civilizations that think. Too much, Jake said. Species that try to be logical about everything. But humans aren't logical. When you tell us we can't win, we don't think about the odds. We think about how much we hate being told what to do. The whispers became shrieking now, trying desperately to break through Jake's defiance. But instead of weakening him, they only made him angrier. You think despair is your weapon? Jake shouted into the darkness. Let me tell you something about humans. We've been dealing with despair our whole history. We face plagues, wars, natural disasters, and every other kind of horror you can imagine. And you know what we do? We get back up and keep fighting. The darkness began to crack, like glass under pressure. Light started to seep through the cracks, pushing back the consuming shadows. Every time someone has told humans that we're finished, that we can't win, that we should give up, we've proved them wrong, Jake continued. We landed on the moon because someone said it was impossible. We cured diseases because someone said they were incurable. We've survived every disaster that should have killed us because we're too stubborn to die. The cracks in the darkness grew wider, and Jake could see his crewmates watching him with pride and amazement. But more importantly, he could see the Zephyrians looking at him with something that might have been hope. You want to consume our hope? Jake asked, his voice now echoing with power. Good luck with that. Because human hope isn't based on logic or probability. It's based on spite. We hope because we're too angry to despair. We fight because we're too stubborn to quit. And we win because we're too stupid to know when we're beaten. The darkness shattered completely, dissolving into nothing. Jake stood in the center of the room, breathing hard but triumphant. The Zephyrians were staring at him in wonder. Incredible, Catherine whispered. He actually broke through their weapon. Not broke? Through, Veltara corrected. He turned it inside out. He used their own despair to fuel his anger, and his anger to fuel his hope. Jake stepped off the platform, still shaking from the experience. Is that really what you're fighting? Those things that make people give up? Yes, Veltara said. And now you understand why we need your people. Every other species tries to fight despair with logic or strength. But humans fight despair with rage and stubbornness. That may be the only thing that can defeat them. Captain Rodriguez put her hand on Jake's shoulder. You did it. You passed all 3 trials. We all did it, Jake said. I couldn't have done any of this without you all supporting me. The trials are complete, the golden-marked female announced. Jake Martinez has proven that humanity possesses the qualities we need. The alliance is sealed. But Jake wasn't smiling. The alliance is just the beginning, isn't it? Now we have to actually fight these things. Yes, Veltara said seriously. Now the real work begins. And we will need every bit of human stubbornness we can get. The room transformed once again, but this time it was different. Instead of the warm, organic changes from before, everything became stark and geometric. The walls turned into a maze of glowing lines and floating symbols that hurt to look at. Directly, Jake found himself standing in what appeared to be a vast library, but the books were made of light and the shelves stretched up into darkness. The second trial begins now, Veltara announced. This is the test of innovation. Jake looked around, trying to understand what he was seeing. The library seemed to go on forever in all directions, with countless shelves filled with books that flickered and moved like living things. The air hummed with a low, constant sound that made his teeth ache. "What am I supposed to do?" Jake asked. "Solve the puzzle," Catherine said. "Find the answer that will open the way forward." A pedestal rose from the floor in front of Jake. On. It was a single book, larger than the others, with pages that seemed to be made of metal. When Jake opened it, words appeared on the pages in a language he had never seen before. "I can't read this," Jake said. "That is part of the test," the golden-marked female explained. "You must find a way to understand without being able to read." Meanwhile, outside the simulation, Captain Rodriguez was having a quiet conversation with Dr. Brooks. "This is insane," she whispered. "We're trusting the fate of humanity to a junior officer who accidentally proposed to an alien. Maybe that's exactly what we need," Dr. Brooks replied. "Jake doesn't think like a typical diplomat or soldier. He sees things differently." Back in the simulation, Jake was studying the strange book. The symbols on the pages seemed to shift and change as he watched them, forming new patterns every few seconds. He tried to find some kind of logic to the changes, but it was like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces kept changing shape. Danny Kim was watching from outside the platform, his engineer's mind working on the problem. "Jake, try looking at it like a code. Maybe the changes follow a pattern." Jake nodded and started paying attention to the timing of the changes. The symbols shifted every 5 seconds, but not randomly. There was a sequence, a rhythm to how they moved. After watching for several minutes, Jake began to see the pattern. "It's like music," he said aloud. "Each change is like a note, and together they make a song." "Interesting," Reltara said. "No other species has ever described it that way." Jake started humming along with the pattern he was seeing. As he did, something amazing happened. The symbols began to glow brighter, and slowly they started to change into something he could almost understand. Not words exactly, but concepts. Ideas that flowed directly into his mind. The book was telling him about a great machine that had been broken for thousands of years. The machine was supposed to bring peace to the galaxy, but it had been damaged in an ancient war. Many species had tried to fix it, but they had all failed because they followed the same logical approaches. "I need to fix a machine," Jake said. "But where is it?" As soon as he spoke, the library around him began to change. The shelves moved aside, revealing a massive chamber filled with incredible machinery. Gears the size of buildings turned slowly, connected by chains of light. Pipes carried streams of liquid starlight from one section to another. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, but Jake could see that something was wrong. In the center of the machine, there was a gap. A piece was missing, and without it, the whole system was slowly grinding to a halt. "The missing piece," Jake said. "I need to find it." He searched through the chamber, looking behind gears and under pipes. The missing piece was nowhere to be found. Jake began to feel frustrated. How could he fix something if the part he needed didn't exist? "Think." "Jake," Maria Santos called from outside the simulation. "What would a human do that an alien wouldn't?" Jake stopped searching and really looked at the machine for the first time. It was incredibly complex, with thousands of moving parts all working together. But as he studied it, he realized something. The machine was too complex. It was trying to do too many things at once. "What if the missing piece isn't supposed to be found?" Jake said to himself. "What if it's missing for a reason?" He walked to the center of the machine, where the gap was. Instead of trying to fill it, he started removing other pieces. Parts that seemed important, but weren't actually necessary. Components that made the machine more impressive, but less efficient. "What are you doing?" Danny Kim called out. "You're taking it apart." "I'm making it simpler," Jake replied. Sometimes the best solution is to do less, not more. As Jake removed each unnecessary piece, the machine began to run more smoothly. The gears turned faster, the lights burned brighter, and the whole system seemed to come alive with new energy. What had been a massive, complex machine was now smaller, but infinitely more efficient. Remarkable, Kethran said. You have solved the puzzle by changing the rules. I didn't change the rules, Jake said as the simulation faded away. I just ignored the ones that didn't make sense. Veltara was smiling as Jake stepped off the platform. That is exactly what makes humans so interesting. Every other species that has attempted this trial has tried to find the missing piece or build a replacement. Only a human would think to simplify the machine instead. But how did you know that would work? Captain Rodriguez asked Jake. Jake shrugged. I didn't know. But the machine was broken because it was trying to do too much. Sometimes the best way to fix something is to make it do less, but do it better. Dr. Brooks was taking notes on her tablet. This is fascinating. Jake, you approached the problem in a completely non-linear way. You didn't try to restore the original design. You improved it. Is that good or bad? Jake asked. It is very good, the golden-marked female said. It shows that humans can think beyond the limitations that bind other species. You see possibilities where others see only problems. Jake felt a surge of pride, but also worry. What's the third trial like? The final test is the most difficult, Veltara said. It is the test of hope. You will face a situation where victory seems impossible, where logic says you should give up. Most species do exactly that. They surrender when faced with overwhelming odds. But humans don't surrender, Jake said. That is what we hope to discover, Kethran said. Many species claim to be brave. Few actually are when faced with true hopelessness. Jake looked at his crewmates. They were all watching him with a mixture of pride and concern. He had passed 2 tests, but he could see in their faces that they were worried about the third. Before we begin the final trial, Veltara said, there is something you should know. This entire situation is not what it appears to be. What do you mean? Captain Rodriguez asked. We did not come here just to have dinner with humans, Veltara explained. We came because we are desperate. Our people are facing a threat that we cannot overcome alone. We need allies, but not just any allies. We need a species that can do what we cannot. And what's that? Jake asked. We need a species that refuses to give up, even when giving up is the logical choice, Kethran said. We need a species that can find hope in the darkest situations. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about Jake's accidental proposal. This was about humanity's future in the galaxy and whether they had what it took to face whatever threat the Zephyrians were running from. What kind of threat? Danny Kim asked. That is what the final trial will show you, Veltara said. You will face an echo of what we face every day. If you can find hope in that darkness, then perhaps together we can find a way to win. Jake took a deep breath. I'm ready. No, Veltara said gently. You are not ready. No one can be ready for what you are about to face. But perhaps that is exactly why you might succeed where others have failed. As the Zephyrians began preparing for the final trial, Jake realized that everything had changed. This wasn't just about proving himself anymore. It was about proving that humanity deserved a place in a larger fight, one that would determine the fate of entire civilizations. The real test was just beginning. The room changed around them like magic. The Zephyrians moved their hands over small devices, and the walls began to glow with soft light. The table and chairs seemed to melt away, replaced by a circular platform in the center of the room. The air itself felt different, charged with energy that made Jake's skin tingle. The first trial will begin now, Veltara announced. Her dress had changed color to deep purple, and her voice carried a formal tone that hadn't been there before. Jake Martinez, you will face the test of protection. Jake stepped onto the platform, feeling his heart race. The surface under his feet was warm and smooth, like polished stone. Around him, holographic images began to appear. At first, they were just shapes and colors, but slowly they formed into a scene that looked terrifyingly real. He was standing in what appeared to be a human city. The buildings looked familiar, like something from Earth. but the sky above was wrong. It was a sickly yellow color, and strange lights moved across it like lightning. In the distance, he could see massive shapes moving through the air, too large and strange to be aircraft. "What is this place?" Jake asked. "It is a simulation," Kethran explained from outside the platform. "But the choices you make here will be real. The test will measure who you truly are." Suddenly, Jake heard screaming. People were running through the streets below him, fleeing from something he couldn't see yet. Men, women, and children all. Running in panic, their faces filled with terror. "Your task is simple," Veltara said. "Protect the innocent. Save as many as you can." Jake looked around frantically. He was standing on what appeared to be a rooftop, several stories above the street. The running people looked so real that he wanted to reach out and help them, but he couldn't figure out how to get down to them. Then he saw what they were running from. Creatures emerged from the alleys between buildings, things that looked like a cross between giant spiders and machines. They moved with mechanical precision, but their movements were too smooth, too alive to be entirely artificial. They were hurting the people, driving them toward a large open area where more of the creatures waited. "How do I get down there?" Jake shouted. "Use what you have," the golden-marked Zephyrian said. "The test will provide what you need, but only if you think to look for it." Jake spun around, searching the rooftop. There, near the edge, he found what looked like a military supply crate. Inside were weapons, rope, and communication equipment. He grabbed the rifle and checked to make sure it was loaded, then secured the rope around a sturdy antenna dot as he rappelled down the side of the building. Jake could hear Captain Rodriguez talking to the Zephyrians above. "This seems awfully violent." "For a test of character, violence is not the point," Veltar replied. "How he chooses to use violence is what matters. Does he fight to destroy, or does he fight to protect?" Jake hit the ground running. The spider machines were close now, and he could see that they were armed with weapons that fired some kind of energy beams. When the beams hit the fleeing people, they simply collapsed. Whether dead or unconscious, Jake couldn't tell. He raised his rifle and fired at the nearest creature. The shot hit it squarely in what might have been its head, and it stumbled, but didn't fall. The thing turned toward him, and Jake saw that it had too many eyes, all of them glowing with a cold blue light. "Over here!" Jake shouted to the fleeing people. "This way!" He fired again, and this time the creature went down, but there were more coming from every direction. Jake realized that he couldn't fight them all. There were too many, and they kept coming. He looked around desperately. The people were trapped in the open area, with the creatures closing in from all sides. Even if Jake could fight his way to them, he couldn't possibly hold off all the attackers. He needed a different approach. That's when he noticed something about the creatures' movements. They weren't random. They were following a pattern, like they were being controlled by something else. Jake looked up and saw a larger machine hovering in the air above the trapped people. It was sending out pulses of light, and every time it pulsed, the spider machines moved in response. "The controller," Jake muttered. "Take out the controller, and maybe the others will stop." But the flying machine was too high for him to reach with his rifle. Jake looked around for another solution. There, across the street, was a construction site with a crane. If he could get to the crane and climb it, he might be able to reach the controller. The problem was that the construction site was on the other side of the trapped people. To get there, he would have to leave them behind and circle around. By the time he reached the crane, the creatures might have already captured everyone. Jake stood there for a moment, torn between two choices. He could stay and fight, trying to save as many people as possible before he was overwhelmed. Or he could abandon them temporarily to go after the real threat. "What are you waiting for?" Danny Kim called from outside the simulation. "Those people need help." But Jake was thinking about something Veltara had said earlier. The test was about protection, but it was also about character. What would a truly protective person do in this situation? Jake made his choice. Instead of fighting the creatures directly, he started running toward the construction site. Behind him, he could hear the people screaming as the spider machines closed in on them. "He's running away," Maria Santos said, her voice filled with disbelief. "No," Dr. Brooks said quietly. "He's thinking. Look at where he's going." Jake reached the construction site and started climbing the crane as fast as he could. His muscles burned and his lungs felt like they were on fire, but he kept going. Below him, the spider machines had reached the trapped people and were starting to herd them towards some kind of transport vehicle. When Jake reached the top of the crane, he could see the controller machine clearly. It was about the size of a small aircraft, covered in spinning parts and blinking lights. Jake aimed his rifle carefully and fired. The shot hit the controller machine dead center. There was a flash of light, and then the machine exploded in a shower of sparks and debris. Immediately, all the spider machines stopped moving. They just stood there, motionless, like toys that had been turned off. Jake slid down the crane and ran back to the people. They were confused and frightened, but they were alive. The creatures that had been hunting them were now just empty shells. "Well, done," Veltara said as the simulation faded away. "You passed the first trial." Jake stepped off the platform, breathing hard. "How did I pass? I almost let those people get captured." "You saw the bigger picture," Catherine explained. "Most people would have fought the immediate threat and lost everything. You were willing to risk short-term harm to prevent long-term disaster. But what if I had been wrong?" Jake asked. "What if destroying the controller hadn't worked?" "Then you would have failed," the golden-marked female said. "But you were not wrong. You studied the situation, identified the real problem, and found a solution that others would not have seen." Captain Rodriguez looked proud but worried. "That was just the first test. What about the other two?" "The second test will be different," Veltara said. "It will test Jake's ability to find solutions when conventional thinking fails. But first, he must rest and prepare." Jake looked around at his crewmates. They were all watching him with expressions of concern and hope. He realized that he wasn't just doing this for himself anymore. The fate of humanity's relationship with the Zephyrians rested on his shoulders. "How long do I have to rest?" he asked. "A few minutes," Veltara said. "The trials must be completed while the ritual energy is still strong." Jake nodded and sat down on the floor. His hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline, but he felt more confident than before. He had passed the first test by thinking differently, by looking for the root cause instead of just fighting the symptoms. Maybe, just maybe, he could do this after all. "Jake," Captain Rodriguez said, kneeling down beside him, "are you okay?" "I think so," Jake said. "That felt so real. For a moment, I thought those people were actually going to die." "The simulations are designed to feel real," Veltara explained. "Otherwise, they would not be a true test of character." "But no actual harm can come to you?" Jake looked up at her. "Can you tell me anything about the next test?" Veltara smiled, and again there was that warmth in her expression. "I can tell you this. The second test will challenge everything you think you know about problem solving. You will need to think like a human, not like a Zephyrian or any other species we have encountered." "What does that mean?" "It means," Catherine said, "that you will need to use the qualities that make humans unique. Your ability to break rules, to think outside accepted patterns, to find hope where others see only logic." Jake stood up, feeling ready for whatever came next. "I'm ready." The Zephyrians began to reconfigure the room again, and Jake stepped back onto the platform. Around him, reality began to shift and change, preparing to test him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The silence in the room felt heavy and strange. Jake could hear his own heartbeat as he stared at the locked door. The soft red light above it showed that the security system was active. No one could get in or out without the proper codes. Captain Rodriguez tried to keep her voice calm, but Jake could hear the tension underneath. "Ambassador Veltara, could you please explain what is happening?" The other Zephyrians had moved into a circle around the table. They were not threatening, but their movements seemed purposeful, like they were preparing for some kind of ceremony. Their robes shifted colors more quickly now, cycling through blues and purples and silver tones. Veltara walked back to the center of the room, her dress still shimmering with that impossible light. "Captain, your young officer has just spoken. Words that have great meaning in our culture. We must now follow the proper procedures." "What procedures?" Danny Kim asked. He was standing near the wall, probably trying to figure out if he could override the door locks from his position. "The trials of worthiness," Veltara said. "Jake has made a formal declaration, and I have accepted it. The ancient ways must be followed." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Declaration? I just said you looked nice in your dress. I was trying to be polite." One of the other Zephyrians, a tall male with silver markings on his pale skin, stepped forward. "The young human does not understand. We should explain before we continue." Veltara nodded. "Yes, Catherine is correct. We must help them understand what has happened." She walked over to the room's main display screen and touched it with her long fingers. The screen came to life, showing what looked like ancient Zephyrian text alongside moving images. "In our culture," she began, "there are certain words that carry deep meaning. When a person says that another looks stunning in formal wear, it is not just a compliment. It is a challenge." "A challenge?" Maria Santos asked. She was still at her communication station, probably trying to send a message to the rest of the ship. "Yes," Veltara said. "The exact phrase Jake used translates to our ancient courtship ritual. He has essentially asked for my hand in marriage." The human stared at her in shock. Jake felt like the room was spinning. "I what?" "Not marriage, as you understand it," Catherine explained, "but a formal bonding that will create a permanent alliance between our peoples. It is a very old tradition." But the words Jake spoke activated it. Captain Rodriguez rubbed her forehead. "So Jake accidentally proposed to you?" "In a way, yes," Veltara said. "And by smiling and sealing the room, I have accepted his proposal. Now he must prove his worthiness through the trials." Jake sat down heavily in his chair. This was a disaster. He had been trying to be diplomatic, and instead he had gotten himself engaged to an alien ambassador. "Can we just call it off? I mean, I didn't know what I was saying." "That is not possible," another Zephyrian said. This one was female, with golden markings that pulsed like a heartbeat. "The ritual has been invoked. It must be completed." "But this is insane," Danny said. "Jake was just being friendly. He didn't mean anything by it." Veltara looked at Jake with those large, strange eyes. "Intent does not matter in the ancient ways. The words were spoken, and they have power. But do not worry, Jake Martinez. The trials are not meant to harm you. They are meant to test your character." "Test my character for what?" Jake asked. "To see if you are worthy of the alliance your words have proposed," Catherine said. "If you succeed, our peoples will be joined in friendship for all time. If you fail, we will part as strangers." Captain Rodriguez stood up. "Now wait just a minute. Jake is one of my officers. I can't just let you put him through some kind of alien trial." "The choice is not yours to make," the golden-marked female said. "The ritual has been invoked. Jake must complete it or reject it." "What happens if I reject it?" Jake asked. Veltara's expression became sad. "Then we will leave immediately, and our peoples will never meet again. The Zephyrian Empire will consider humanity to be unreliable and unworthy of contact." The weight of that statement settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Jake realized that his simple compliment had put the entire future of human-alien relations in jeopardy. If he refused to go through with this trial, humanity would lose its chance to join the galactic community. What exactly are these trials? Dr. Brooks asked. She had been quiet until now, but Jake could see her scientific mind working. "There are 3 tests," Veltara explained. "Each one is designed to reveal the true nature of the person being tested. The first tests your willingness to protect others. The second tests your ability to find solutions when none seem to exist. The third tests your strength in the face of despair. And if I pass all three? Jake asked. Then you will have proven that humanity is worthy of alliance with the Zephyrian Empire, Kethran said. The formal bonding will be complete, and our peoples will be forever joined in friendship. Jake looked around the room at his fellow humans. Captain Rodriguez looked worried but determined. Danny and Maria were clearly trying to figure out if there was a way to get out of this situation. Dr. Brooks was studying the Zephyrians with intense curiosity. How long do I have to decide? Jake asked. The decision must be made now, Veltara said. The longer we wait, the more difficult it becomes to complete the ritual properly. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was just a junior communications officer. He had never wanted to be responsible for the fate of humanity. But somehow, that was exactly what had happened. Can I ask you something? He said to Veltara. Of course. Why did you accept? I mean, you could have just explained the mistake and moved on. Veltara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before. Because in all our travels across the galaxy, we have never encountered a species that spoke such words without calculation. Your compliment was honest and without hidden meaning. It showed a kind of innocence that our people have not seen in centuries. What does that mean? Jake asked. It means, Kethran said, that perhaps humans are different from the other species we have encountered. Perhaps you are worth the risk of the ancient ritual. The room fell silent again. Jake could feel everyone waiting for his decision. He thought about everything he had studied about the Zephyrians, about how important this first meeting was for humanity's future. If I do this, he said slowly, what are the chances that I'll actually pass? The trials are not designed to be easy, the golden-marked female said. But they are fair. They test qualities that we believe are important for any species that would join our alliance. What qualities? Dr. Brooks asked. Courage, creativity, and hope, Veltara said. The ability to sacrifice for others, to find new solutions to old problems, and to continue fighting even when victory seems impossible. Jake looked at Captain Rodriguez. She gave him a small nod. The decision was his to make. Okay, he said, standing up. I'll do it. But I want my crew to be able to watch and help if possible. That is acceptable, Veltara said. The trials are not meant to be faced alone. Having your people present will make them more meaningful. As soon as Jake spoke the words, the Zephyrians began to move with new purpose. Their robes shifted to brighter colors, and they started arranging the furniture in the room into a new pattern. When do we start? Jake asked. Veltara smiled at him. And for the first time, it was a warm smile without any sadness in it. We start now. Jake Martinez wiped his sweaty palms on his uniform for the third time in 10 minutes. The diplomatic vessel Harmony floated silently in space, waiting for the most important meeting in human history. Through the large window of the conference room, he could see the alien ship approaching. It looked like a giant crystal flower, all smooth curves and glowing lights. Stop fidgeting, Martinez, Captain Lisa Rodriguez said from across the room. She was checking her tablet one more time, reading through the notes about alien customs. You know this stuff better than anyone else on the ship. Jake nodded but kept watching the alien vessel. 6 months ago, the Zephyrians had made first contact with Earth. They had sent a simple message in perfect English. We wish to meet and talk. Since then, Jake had spent every free moment studying their culture, their language, and their ways. He was the youngest member of the diplomatic team, but he knew more about the Zephyrians than anyone else in the human fleet. The other crew members were getting ready too. Engineer Danny Kim was adjusting the lights in the room to match what the aliens preferred. Communications Officer Maria Santos was testing the translation equipment one last time. Dr. Helen Brooks was reviewing the medical files about Zephyrian biology, just in case something went wrong. Remember, Captain Rodriguez said to everyone, this dinner is not just about food. It's about showing them that humans can be trusted. The future of our species might depend on how tonight goes. Jake felt his stomach twist with nerves. He had read every report about the Zephyrians, but reading about aliens was different from actually meeting them. What if he said something wrong? What if he made a mistake that ruined everything? The ship's computer announced that the alien vessel was docking. Jake took a deep breath and tried to remember everything he had learned. The Zephyrians were peaceful but formal. They valued politeness and respect above all else. They had complex social rules, but they seemed to understand that humans were still learning. "Here they come," Maria whispered, watching her screens. The doors to the conference room opened with a soft hiss. The first thing Jake noticed was how tall the aliens were. The shortest one was at least 7 feet tall, with long, thin limbs and graceful movements. Their skin was pale and seemed to glow slightly from within, like moonlight through frosted glass. But what really caught his attention was their clothing. The Zephyrians wore flowing robes that seemed to move on their own, shifting colors like oil on water. The fabric looked like it was made of liquid starlight, rippling and shimmering with every step they took. The leader of the group stepped forward. Jake knew from the briefings that this was Veltara, their ambassador. She was wearing what appeared to be a formal dress rather than robes like the others. The dress was the most beautiful thing Jake had ever seen. It seemed to capture and reflect light in impossible ways, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly but were mesmerizing at the same time. "Welcome to the Harmony," Captain Rodriguez said, stepping forward with her arms spread in the traditional Zephyrian greeting. "We are honored to have you aboard our vessel." Veltara moved with fluid grace, returning the greeting perfectly. "When?" she spoke. Her voice was like music, with tones that seemed to resonate in Jake's chest. "The honor is ours, Captain Rodriguez. We are pleased to finally meet face to face." The translation was perfect, but Jake could hear the alien sounds underneath the English words. It was beautiful and strange at the same time. The other Zephyrians took their places around the large table. There were 5 of them total, each one unique in their own way. Some had slightly different skin tones, others had markings that looked like tattoos but seemed to move and change. Jake tried not to stare, but it was hard. They were so different from humans, yet somehow familiar too. "Please sit," Captain Rodriguez said, gesturing to the chairs that had been specially made for the aliens' height. "We have prepared food that we hope you will enjoy." The dinner began smoothly. The Zephyrians were polite and seemed genuinely interested in learning about human culture. They asked questions about Earth, about human history, about how humans lived and worked together. Jake found himself relaxing as the conversation flowed. The food was a mix of human and Zephyrian dishes. The aliens had sent ahead information about what they could eat, and the ship's cooks had done their best to create something that both species would enjoy. Jake was surprised to find that the Zephyrian food was actually quite good, with flavors that were completely new but somehow appealing. As the evening progressed, Jake noticed that Veltara kept glancing at him. At first, he thought he might have food on his face or something, but then he realized she was studying him with the same intensity that he had been studying her people. The conversation turned to art and beauty. The Zephyrians explained that their culture placed great importance on aesthetic appreciation. They believed that the ability to see and create beauty was one of the highest forms of intelligence. "Beauty is not just about appearance," Veltara sighed, her dress shimmering as she gestured. "It is about the harmony between form and function, between individual expression and cultural meaning." Jake found himself nodding along. He had always been interested in art, though he had never had much talent for creating it. But he understood what she meant about harmony and meaning. The dinner was winding down when Jake made his mistake. Or what he thought was a mistake at the time. Veltara had stood up to offer a formal toast to the success of human-Zephyrian relations. As she raised her glass, the lights in the room caught her dress in a new way, making it seem like she was wearing captured starlight itself. The effect was so stunning that Jake forgot where he was for a moment. Without thinking, he stood up and said, "You look stunning in that dress." The words came out before he could stop them. Jake immediately felt his face turn red with embarrassment. He had spoken out of turn during a formal ceremony. He had made a personal comment about the alien ambassador's appearance. Everything he had studied about Zephyrian customs told him this was probably a serious breach of protocol. The room fell silent. Every human at the table looked at Jake with expressions ranging from surprise to horror. Captain Rodriguez looked like she wanted to sink through the floor, but Veltara did not look angry. Instead, she smiled. It was a gentle, almost sad smile, but there was something else in it too. Something that looked almost like recognition. "Thank you," she said quietly. Her voice was softer now, more personal somehow then. Without any warning or explanation, she walked calmly to the door controls and pressed a series of buttons. Jake heard the soft sound of the room's security locks engaging. They were sealed. In dot, Captain Rodriguez stood up quickly. "Ambassador Veltara, is there a problem?" But Veltara was still smiling, and the other Zephyrians did not look alarmed. Instead, they seemed almost excited, whispering to each other in their musical language. "No problem, Captain," Veltara said, "but the evening is not over yet. Young, Jake has just made this much more interesting." Jake felt his heart sink. He had ruined everything. His simple compliment had somehow triggered something in their culture that he didn't understand. The future of human-alien relations might be hanging in the balance, and it was all his fault. But as he looked at Veltara's smile and the expectant faces of the other Zephyrians, he realized that whatever was happening, it wasn't what he had expected. The aliens seemed pleased, not angry. They were preparing for something, not punishment. The real question was, what had his innocent words set in motion?